Hello and welcome. We have with us Nooraine Fazal, the co-founder and managing trustee of the Inventure Academy. She's an alumna of the Boston University and has worked with the Reuters Group in the past. She's an entrepreneur and educationist and also a sports and yoga enthusiast. Welcome, Nooraine.
Thank you so much, Reshma. Thank you to you and Education World.
What is your 3-point prescription to revitalize Indian K-12 education post-pandemic?
Okay. I think the very first thing is that education has to be the topmost national priority for education, for India rather. Education absolutely has to be the #1 priority for India. And that comes with the commitment and the acknowledgement and the belief that every child can learn and that every person deserves a shot at living at the very minimum a life of dignity and to get an education which will enable them to fulfill their potential as a human being. I think we need to have a vision for education. NEP does have one, which I think is good, and all stakeholders need to come together to work on the achievement of the vision. I do also think that the vision for NEP needs to tweak a wee bit, and the vision that we recommend at Inventure is as follows. It should have an education system that enables every citizen to fulfill their potential and sustainably transforms India into an equitable society of enterprising and skilled citizens capable of contributing to global development across all fields of human endeavor. I would recommend that we have right to learn groups established where you have educators, on the lines of which Education World sort of acknowledges each other with the rankings. There are schools in India which are already delivering the kind of education that NEP is talking about. Leverage the skills, the expertise, and the passion of these people. The third area that I'd recommend is really to ensure that we bring the best and brightest into education. A vision is meaningless unless you have the right people. And the way to do it is to give people the freedom to innovate and to incentivize public-private partnership, to bring in people who've got the expertise and the skill set to really bring the vision to life.
Like we know, Karnataka has decided to reopen in-person classes in schools in a phased manner. So what does the response from parents look like at this point in time?
Over 50% of our students have chosen to come back to school.
Okay.
We are going to be running classes 3 days a week on campus as well as for children. So it's going to be hybrid learning. Say about 50% of the class is going to be on campus, 50% is going to carry on at home. We've equipped the classrooms. We've invested about 3 lakhs per classroom to install cameras, to install mics, smart interactive boards, and so on and so forth to ensure that we can enable this. I think it was right of the government to take the decision to reopen schools. I just wish they'd done it much earlier. And we really need to bring back preschool and primary school children to school as well. And I think it's not just a question of vaccinating everybody, which is critical, but I think the government should also invest in ensuring that schools have the technology and teachers have the capacity and the know-how on how to conduct hybrid learning. It's obviously not okay and not possible to force students to come back or parents to send their kids or for every teacher and team member to come back to campus right now. And this is where I think the government needs to step in to provide the enabling technology and the know-how in terms of for a teacher to teach a class and do justice both to children in school as well as on campus. At home.
Okay. So what does the response look like? Parents, are they keen to send their kids to school?
Yes, very keen. Because it's not so much about the learning in terms of academics or cognitive development. Our board exam results, we actually did do board exams on campus for Cambridge last year. And the performance of the class, which did a complete year online, was actually comparable to the results of the school and the students in a non-pandemic year. So clearly there are no gaps per se in learning for schools like Inventure, where children, teachers and parents are fortunate to have the technology and the support at home, if you like. But there's a tremendous impact in just being isolated for children. So really, we have 4 counselors at school, and 50% of our students at last year connected with our counselors, which basically tells us that children are feeling the impact of the pandemic because they're concerned about health, either their own or their loved ones, and they're feeling the impact of the isolation. Right. So it's important for children to come back to campus. It's important for all of us to get back. I mean, human beings are social, right? We're not meant to be locked away at home. I guess that's why there are prisons, because we don't like that.
You were one of the few schools that made an online switch even before the government directive was issued. So if blended learning is the future, what should the government do to empower government and budget schools in the country?
Right. I think in the same way that we're building national highways, the government needs to invest in creating a digital infrastructure for the country. Okay. And which is why I said, let's be the change and bridge Bharat with India, right? You've got to invest in the IT infrastructure. I mean, even now, while you and I are having this conversation, we are in the IT capital of the country, but even we are struggling with connectivity. So one is really to upgrade connectivity. 2 is to ensure that every child has access to a device. And I don't mean just a smartphone, but something which really brings the classroom to life. So, a tablet or laptop at the very minimum. And really, I think embrace that learning is not about transferring information or knowledge and hoping that children will learn. It has to be interactive. So yes, the government has tried through some portals, and they basically providing worksheets. They're doing television channels, but we learn in an interactive way. So the government has to.
What were some of the challenges you had to overcome, to put your school on the list of top schools in India?
I co-founded the school. So actually worked on conceptualizing it and setting it up. So really, I think it was really a recognition that the time had come for India to have schools where children were actually happy to go to, right? And it's not that just because the child is happy that they're not going to learn. It's quite the opposite. So the big challenges we faced really were, one was regulatory, and that is an ongoing challenge. In fact, when I first came back to India, it was to set up a business school along with an incubator. And what I quickly recognized was that it was not possible to do it in a feasible manner given the regulatory framework. And 2, I said, let's focus on young minds and make sure that they've got the skills, the attitudes for the future. So 1 was the regulatory challenge, 2 was the mindset of what constitutes a good education. I think for the longest time, people believed that a good education was one where children aced the board exam. I think the pandemic has taught us that life is not about having the right answers to pre-known questions. It goes way beyond that. So really, mindset that every child can learn, and we need to not just focus on performance in a board exam, but preparing children for life, to be resilient, to be innovative, to be adaptive, to be happy. And the other big challenges, of course, that we had to overcome is people. We have about 50 to 70 applicants each year for every 1 position we have, but we're still not able to find the entire faculty that we need, the kind of people that we need to deliver on the kind of education that we offer, and that's what NEPs are talking about as well.
One thinker or philosopher that you admire the most?
Life.
Okay. Your favorite Nobel laureate?
So there's Tagore, because I think he was the first, and he was a poet, he was an educationist, he was a philosopher. Amartya Sen and Abhijit Banerjee, because they work with welfare economics. Kailash Satyagarthi, right? Yeah, because his work with children and the right to education, and more recently Malala, because I think for what she's gone through, for the kind of society she comes from, and her age is just phenomenal.
Can you describe your leadership style in 1 phrase?
Lead change by example. So lead from the front, and roll your sleeves up and do whatever you ask your team to do.
Okay. And what's your favorite book on education?
favorite book on education, I would say it's life again, really. It's taking
Okay.
the road less traveled and enjoying everything that life has to offer and all the curveballs it offers. And
This was a very interesting discussion. So thank you so much for being with us.
no, thank you. Thank you very much. It was an enjoyable interaction, and thank you for the thought-provoking questions.